Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the channel. It's Cynicalex, and today I want to talk to you guys about the top 10 best superheroes. We did a video before about the top 10 best super villains, so I wanted to take the time to do this list, but I wanted to put some restrictions on it so that we don't have the same characters being repeated over and over and over again. So of course, like the other video for supervillains, I will not be covering native tier 2 superheroes, the likes of Doctor Strange and Odin. They will not be in this video. But as well, I want to cover characters who don't need their uniforms, specifically don't need their uniforms to be great. So for these top 10 superheroes, I will not be including people like Iron Fist, because without his uniform, his value drops dramatically. I will not be including characters like Elsa, whose uniform makes her a tremendous character, but without her uniform, she's quite lackluster. Or even characters like Thor, who is decent with his uniform and basically unusable without it. So for characters that absolutely need their uniform, you will not find them in this list. This list is comprised almost entirely of great superheroes who do not even have a uniform to their name. I'm of course also going to skip paywall characters because you guys seem to enjoy that more, and I think it gives you a better representation for people who aren't paying money for the BIOS subscriptions. So let's jump into it, guys. Number 10, ShangChi. ShangChi is a great superhero because of multiple reasons. He's got immunity on his 5th skill with a pretty nice AoE attack. He's got a buff on his 3rd skill right there that gives him an all attack boost. And he's got an attack leadership of 24%, which applies to both energy damage and physical damage dealing characters. On top of that, ShangChi has a 4th skill ability, which gives him a guard kind of randomly every 10 seconds, I believe, or 11 seconds. So altogether, he's a pretty decent hero, and he's pretty good for the combat class. He's a bit more unique. I would say ShangChi is probably best compared to someone like Giant Man. He's probably a much better version of Giant Man because despite not having a uniform, he does have immunity. He's got ways to self-buff, and he's got other ways to protect himself from damage. And let's be honest, his animations look super badass. At number 9, we have Medusa. We've talked about Medusa before on this channel, and I wouldn't be surprised if she does get a uniform soon because she does have it teased on the artwork for the Monsters Unleashed. But even despite the fact that she doesn't have a uniform, Medusa, I think, is a pretty decent character. Multiple iframes, immunity that you can trigger when you want, and immunity that also buffs you equal a pretty decent overall character. Not to mention the fact that she's a universal type, which we know is premium for things like Shadowlands, but she is also one that boosts up her own damage to the tune of 36%. And despite what some people may have thought, it's actually applying to both supervillains and superheroes. So she has one of the top leaderships offensively in the game. And that looks really cool as well, guys. Her hair is just awesome. The way they animated it, fantastic, guys. Number 8, we have our boy Robbie Reyes. Robbie Reyes probably takes the cake as the best Ghost Rider, and what better reason than the car. He's got multiple iframes, he's got a 5 guard hit on his 4th skill, and he just does pretty respectable damage, but it's really the survivability of his character that takes him to the next level. He's got so many ways of staying iframed for so long that it's basically very difficult to die with him if you're manually controlling him. Yes, his damage can suffer a little bit because of that, and because you're kind of stuck there, frozen again. But especially at tier 2, his damage really takes a jump up, and he's just so easy to handle, looks so cool. Those flying knives and all the car animations just make him a very cool superhero, and he's very relevant in today's meta with characters like Dormammu because he's got that 80% chance to resist fire damage, and he's got a very good dodge ignore leadership for things like Shadowlands and Corvus World Boss. At number 7, we have Inferno. Now, while I don't have Inferno at 6 stars yet, I do know that he is a very good character from what I've seen, and I can read it in his skill animations and skill information. He's got a guard hit on one of his skills. He's got a buff on another one of his skills, I believe. The guard hit is on his 3rd skill, and the buff is, I believe, on his 4-star passive or on one of his other skills. And although I died there from taking too much damage, Inferno is a very good character who can again scale his damage with fire from an obelisk or from a leadership. And he does have a very strong tier 2 that just increases his buffs even more. And he's very relevant in the meta right now because of the likes of Dormammu with Inferno's fire resist leadership and his percent chance to be fire immune 4-star passive. At number 6, we have Crystal, the closest thing to Storm from X-Men. Crystal is another Inhuman with a lot of potential. She's got a guard on her 5th skill to the tune of 7 hits, which is fantastic. She's got skills that give her iframes, which is great for increasing her survivability. And she's got elemental attacks, which she can scale not only with her tier 2, but also with things like an obelisk. And on top of that, she's got a damage leadership. So she's a very, very strong character at tier 1 or at tier 2. In addition to those things, her 5th skill also provides a massive 4 seconds of like stun or bind, similar to Doctor Strange's time freeze, which is, you know, so powerful for Shadowlands. She can solo well above her skill level for regular tier 1 characters, almost into the 20s if you have enough energy attack on your cards. So she's a very meaningful addition to any roster, and she's a very powerful superhero. I can't imagine how much stronger she's going to get with a uniform, but if she did get a uniform that gave her a heal or that gave her more damage to compensate, she would be a real monster in this game. At number 5, we have Silk, and I know what you're going to say, but Cynicalex, she has a uniform, yes, but her functionality is almost exactly the same without it. She only changes one skill, and the CC properties don't affect world bosses, so it's not that big of a deal. Silk is a fantastic character for 2 primary reasons. Her 3rd skill offers her an 8-second guard hit, which is fantastic for avoiding damage, and she's got not 1 but 2 skills on her 1st and her 5th, which web. Now the webbing is not available here against world bosses, but against Shadowlands and against other arenas, especially PvP ones, Silk can be incredibly difficult to deal with. Basically, the only thing that Silk is missing from her tier 1 kit is damage. She doesn't have a damage leadership because the bleed doesn't apply against world bosses, and she just doesn't do that much damage with her skills. So with her tier 2, however, she does get that in spades. She gets a massive bump to her crit rate and crit damage, and she does also get some guaranteed dodge, which makes her a very scary character in certain one-on-one scenarios. But as you can see, she performs very well even without a uniform, which is why she's probably a very strong superhero and potentially one of the best, if not the best, speed spider web character. At number 4, we have Moon Knight, and much like Silk, he doesn't necessarily need his uniform to perform very well. It does give him 1 additional iframe, but even without it, he has 2 iframes, and he's got the big heal at tier 2 and the AoE on his 5th skill. Now I know some of you are going to be upset because Iron Fist is not on this list, but Moon Knight is, but I can basically make the argument for you by just watching the following clips. Iron Fist is basically a totally different character without his uniform. He doesn't have damage immunity, he doesn't have the iframes on his 5th skill, so he basically changes completely. But Moon Knight doesn't change that much, especially because his tier 2 is revolving around a heal, so he basically just gets a lot of damage and an iframe from the uniform at 20%, but aside from that, he's still a very serviceable character with or without his uniform, and he still has a lot of the tools available to him that he needs to get the job done. While he's arguably a lot worse at tier 1 because he doesn't have the heal and his damage is still quite low, he's still a very useful character to have. And one of the strongest combat characters, even without a leadership that deals damage, he still clears Ebony in less than a minute. At number 3, we have Hellstorm. Hellstorm's bread and butter really comes from his 5th skill. With a 7-second or 8-second cooldown and a massive 5 seconds of damage immunity, it's very easy to dominate with Hellstorm. In addition to that, because he deals fire damage on all of his skills, it's very easy to scale with a leadership or with an obelisk or both. In addition to those 2 facts, he also has a boost, a damage boost on his 3rd skill and an iframe on his 1st skill when he jumps up, which basically gives him the total toolkit, not to mention the fact that he has summons on his 4th skill. Yes, these invisible little summons that you should not use against Fenris. The only thing missing from this gargantuan kit would be healing. And guess what he gets at tier 2? He gets a heal. He also gets an additional damage proc, which basically negates the need to have that 60% fire damage leadership, but you can always double up and have both. Not to mention the fact that just from a gameplay perspective, the AoE on his 5th skill is insane. It hits so many mobs, which makes him a fantastic addition for Extreme Alliance Battle, and his clones, which you should not use in World Boss Invasion, do carry aggro. So they will take the attention of the World Boss away from you, and they will give you time to do other things, like they are giving me right now. Overall, Hellstorm is one of the best characters to come out of the Doctor Strange update, aside from, of course, Doctor Strange, and it's not too difficult to see why. With no damage leadership, if I had hit him before he did that attack, it would have been 1 minute and 30 seconds, which is fantastic for him. At number 2, we have Black Bolt, and just like Moon Knight and Silk, he does not need his uniform to perform. It's really that tier 2 passive that makes him one of the best superheroes in the game, bar none, aside from the native tier 2s. Number 2 on the list, Black Bolt is a fantastic character. And while I have to say that I do really like his new uniform, and yes, it does add to the character's damage output tremendously, he doesn't need the uniform to perform. He still gets a damage boost from his tier 2 passive, he still has the immunity, he still has everything he needs. And at tier 1, he is a bit of an underwhelming character, but that is irrespective of the fact that you have his uniform or not. The uniform does not take him from a bad character to a good character at tier 1, the way it can do for characters like Iron Fist and Thor. So it's really not essential to his kit. It's arguable, of course, that it's necessary if you're going to build up the character, especially if you're going to tier 2 him, but if you're really tight on resources, or if you just want to save your crystals for something else, he's still an invaluable superhero to have on your roster, especially due to the fact that he's a universal and he has huge AoE on a lot of his skills like Hellstorm does. He's basically only missing a heal and or clones from his kit in order to be basically perfect, but despite that fact, and despite the fact that his damage does take a hit without his uniform, he is still very, very strong, and we're probably going to clear this one in about the same time as we did with Hellstorm, and we did avoid getting frozen there. Huge AoE on his 5th skill, clears out mobs, super easy, and he's just a fantastic character to play as. I didn't honestly give him enough praise back before when he got his tier 2, but I can see now what everyone was talking about. There we go, less than 1 minute and 30. That's with no uniform, and he's just a badass. And at number 1, you may have guessed it, Sharon Rogers. Yes, Robo Bitch is taking the top spot this time, guys. Now, while some people would be kind of upset if she got a uniform, I for one welcome it. You know, I simultaneously love and hate Sharon Rogers because while she isn't attached to any comic book or movie properties, and she is the kind of brainchild of the Netmarble devs, she is pretty cool. She's got 5 seconds of immunity with a damage proc on her 3rd skill. She's got dual type physical and energy damage on a lot of her attacks, despite the fact that she's only an energy damage dealing character from her main stat page. She's got iframes that look amazing as far as their animation goes. She looks really cool aesthetically speaking. I'm sure if she was in the comics, she would probably be a huge badass. And even at tier 1, guys, she deals insane burst damage. Sharon Rogers basically ushered in the era of crazy burst damage dealing characters into the game. She is the Doctor Strange before Doctor Strange. She basically redefined the meta all on her own, and she remains relevant to this day amid characters like Odin, Dormammu, and other beings. She still holds a candle to their flame. So you gotta give a little bit of respect, and you gotta give it up to Sharon Rogers. Tier 1 clears almost as fast as Moon Knight, and she only gets better at tier 2, guys. Not a lot of bad that I can say for Sharon Rogers, but of course, guys, let me know what you think. Is my list complete? Who am I missing? Honorable mention goes out to Kate Bishop, Gwenpool, Clea, Yondu, and Wasp. Although some of them have uniforms, I still think they're tremendous characters without their uniforms. But I think my list is pretty solid, but let me know what you think. Let me know what your thoughts are. Which of these characters who don't have uniforms, because 7 out of the 10 don't, deserves one the most? And of course, guys, if you like what you see, I hope to see you again tomorrow. Take care.